It's been over 2 years since I added the Logi Dock to my desk as my everyday speaker, speakerphone, and USB hub. It's quite frankly excellent. I covered a lot of the basics in my first impressions video when I first received it, but that was over 2 years ago. Man, time flies. Today, I'll go through my key learnings and experiences over the past 2 years, including reviewing the physical design, the audio capabilities, and the video display capabilities. I'll provide a wish list to Logitech for feature additions in a potential V2, and I'll directly address the ideal candidate for who I think should buy this. But first, I'll come right out and address the key differentiators and deal breakers. From the positive side, it's got a clean look, which is simple and I'd call it elegant. It unites both a USB hub and a speakerphone, which may be two distinct items on many people's desks. It has excellent speaker sound quality, especially for its size. And finally, it's a great value, especially with how frequently it gets discounted. Now, key potential deal breakers include some video quality constraints, including specific challenges on Macs, some inconsistency in performance with the Bluetooth connection, the buttons, and the lights, all of which have improved over time, but have caused some rocky moments over the 2-year span. The next deal breaker is dependency on the Logi Tune software program to access all of the full features, which can be particularly problematic if you're using this with a company laptop. And finally, there is the large 230-watt power brick, which can detract from the otherwise elegant and simplistic design when it sits on your desk. If after hearing those key items and the details that are going to follow, you'd like to pick up a Logi Dock, I've got affiliate links in the video description, which helps provide my channel with a commission without changing the price for your purchase. And if I convince you not to make a purchase, maybe drop the video a like or subscribe as a thank you for preventing you from getting something you'd otherwise be unhappy with. And now with all of that out of the way, let's jump into the full details. Starting with the build and design, the Logi Dock is available in 2 colors and 2 versions. There is this black version as well as a white one. They come in a Microsoft Teams specific version or this one, which is the UC version or Unified Communications, which means that it's compatible across collaboration platforms, which include certifications with Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, Google Voice, Zoom, and Tencent Meeting. On top sits 5 buttons. These allow you to mute and unmute your microphone, control speaker volume, and turn your camera on and off. The middle button is the only real change between the Teams and the UC versions. The Teams model uses this button to launch Teams, accept or end calls, and do a few other Teams-specific functions. On UC, this controls the Logi Tune app, which lets you connect to Outlook or Google to alert you to meetings and join calls. In the end, this was by far the least used feature for me. Now, if you are fully in the Teams and Microsoft ecosystem, getting and using that Teams-specific version may be beneficial. If not, then you're really reliant on Logitech's own software, which could very well be blocked by your company's IT team. If you do happen to get access to it, though, there are some handy features by integrating your calendar, but ultimately, the last thing I think that anyone needs in their workday is another device or app beeping or flashing notifications at them. My personal opinion is to just ignore most of these functions, especially since they're often reliant on that software, which may make it a non-starter, especially if you're at a large company. Also on the front of the device are indicator lights. Now these light up when you connect, when you're on an active call, and when you have incoming calls or notifications with that applicable software that we just discussed. The lights are pretty bright without being distracting, and they shine down onto your desk, which is nice. The mute and camera buttons on top also light up when you're on a call, appearing white when on or active and red when off or muted. As with a lot of software-related items with this device, these were hit or miss, especially in the early days. This was a first-generation product and unlike anything else that Logitech had ever produced. Since I ordered one literally as soon as possible, I saw those quirks get worked out in real time. At this point, the lights and functions all seem to be working pretty smoothly, but having experienced situations where mute colors didn't match reality or buttons didn't respond at all, it's tough for me to sit here and guarantee that they'll be perfect 100% of the time. I do, though, want to explain how they function when they work correctly, which, as I mentioned, is basically all the time with the latest firmware. Now, once you join a call, you will see a full array of white lights, indicating that your mic and camera are active when you're in the call. With a tap of the microphone, you will become muted. This changes the lighting on the device and changes the status on the call. So importantly, this is not just a physical device mute. This is actually talking to Zoom in this case, and showing everyone that you are muted rather than just being muted from your microphone point of view. The same goes for the camera. White lights mean the camera is active, and one tap turns your camera off. Additionally, this works whether the call is in the current window that you're on or not. So if you're on a call and you're multitasking in Excel or PowerPoint or something else, then you need to come off mute to reply and then go right back on mute. You can do that without flipping back to Zoom first. This is super handy and not something that every single speakerphone can do. As you move around the device, you'll see a single 7.5 watt USB-C port on the side. This is the only port that's somewhat accessible when on your desk, as there are no ports on the front. And when we continue around, we find a slew of ports on the back. There is the primary USB-C connection to your laptop, highlighted in purple, which provides 100 watts of charging to your laptop. Then there are two display outputs, one DisplayPort and one HDMI. More on those details later. Finally, we have two 5-watt USB-C ports, plus a 5-watt USB-A port and a 7.5-watt USB-A port. You can always tell which are the more powerful 7.5-watt ports by looking for the lightning bolt next to them. Finally, there is a Kensington lock for use in corporate settings, a Bluetooth button, which we'll discuss later as well, and finally a round barrel port for power from the wall. This power is provided by the 230-watt power brick, which is almost as big as the Logi Dock itself. There is a lot to break down here, first of which is the gigantic power brick. It's truly a brick, and you'll need to find some space to accommodate it. I was able to mount it to the bottom of my desk with 4 hook and loop command strips. It hasn't fallen off in the 2 years I've had it, so it seems pretty reliable. However, I imagine that this large brick could be a deal breaker for some would-be purchasers. Next, the ports have some important callouts. I'll start with the USB-C ports. The 7.5 watt USB-C port on the side works great for just about anything, from phones to keyboards, headphones, mice, whatever you throw at it. Though interestingly, it has been finicky at times. For example, it doesn't seem to work with Apple's latest MagSafe puck for whatever reason. The two 5-watt USB-C ports on the back won't charge a modern cell phone under any circumstances. This is specifically called out in Logitech's documentation and holds true in testing during my first impressions video as well as now. The only additional piece of information that I've learned is that if you attach a USB-C hub to one of these ports and then plug in a modern cell phone to the hub, it will charge. Much like when I filmed my first Logi Dock video, I am very much not an electrical engineer, so I don't know why it behaves this way, but if you really needed to use one of those ports on a phone for some reason, there's your workaround. The second callout is more complicated and is related to the USB-A ports. The one denoted with the lightning bolt is 7.5 watts and is always on. The other one is only 5 watts and behaves differently when a computer is plugged into the Logi Dock versus when one is not. The exact behavior, however, is complicated. If you're trying to charge a cell phone, Logitech tells you in their documentation that it will work when a computer is attached and it will not work when there's no computer. This was tested in my first video and it remains true today. Commenters on that first video pointed out how this can be really useful if you have a wired keyboard that you want to turn off, particularly if it's got some RGB lights, for example, when you remove your computer. However, when it came to testing with a Keychron keyboard, this was not the behavior. It remained on and lit in either port with and without a computer. Next, I thought that this could be useful to turn off a light, like the lit your beam, whenever a computer is removed. Interestingly, anytime a computer is removed, the light does turn off. However, both ports still provide enough power with no computer attached to use the light successfully. So if you press the power button, it still turns on. So at this point, I was beginning to think that the restriction must truly be limited to phones, and that every other device would behave the same. However, then I hooked up my webcam. In the 5-watt port, this thing turns on when I plug in my computer and off when I remove it. If I use the 7.5-watt port, on the other hand, when I remove the computer, the webcam gets confused why it's powered on but has no computer connection, and so it just blinks and blinks forever. So as it turns out, the 5-watt port is perfect for a webcam, and maybe that's what they had in mind. However, the lack of continuity in how it behaves leaves me less with an explanation and more with just observations. Now let's talk about audio. Given that this is a speakerphone after all, audio is a huge consideration for a purchase decision. In this case, audio is broken down into two components, the speaker's sound and the microphone quality. Starting with the speaker, the sound from the Logi Dock is awesome. It's crystal clear and has bold, punchy bass that's pretty unexpected from a device this small. I compared it side by side to the latest UE Boom 4, also a speaker made by Logitech, and one that I think sounds pretty incredible. When playing music, the dock boasted significantly more bass, much more on par with the larger UE Mega Boom. However, even more importantly, it had clearer vocals. This aspect both makes music more enjoyable and it enhances the experience when you're using this for its intended primary use as a speakerphone. Over my 2 years with the Logi Dock, almost entirely as a fully remote worker, this thing has seen a ton of use across Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, etc. In every single case, the speaker sound has always been brilliant. Plenty loud and very clear. If you're not personally in love with the sound, there is a 5-band EQ adjustment available, but you do need to have that Logi Tune app in order to change it, which I mentioned earlier. Finally, your Logi Dock can also function as a Bluetooth speaker. Using the button on the back, press and hold to enable Bluetooth pairing, connect your phone, and you can begin playing your favorite music app through your desktop speaker. The next time you want to connect, it's even easier. Just a single tap of that Bluetooth button will automatically attempt to pair to the most recently connected device, making it quick and easy to repair your phone in the future. Using Bluetooth on your phone is especially great if your company prohibits you from downloading something like Spotify on your computer. Better still, if you need to hop on a Zoom meeting, you don't need to disconnect your Bluetooth connection. Just pause the music and your speakerphone works exactly as you'd expect. When you're done, hit play and you're back to your tunes. Now, despite the overall positives of having Bluetooth, my only issues with the speaker over the last 2 years has been when using Bluetooth. Every once in a while, establishing the Bluetooth connection doesn't work as it should, and the only way to reestablish is to re-enter pairing mode on the dock and forget the device on my phone. Then it will work. In addition to that, the Bluetooth connection to the Logi Dock is strong and rather aggressive. Because you can simply pause your music and resume work activities, it's easy to forget that you're connected. Then, since the Logi Dock is always powered on, you remain connected to the speaker indefinitely, as long as you're within range. There have been more than a handful of occasions where I've ended my workday, not realizing I'm still connected to the speaker, and then hours later from another part of my house, been confused why my audio is not working, only to find that it was playing out of the dock in my office the whole time. The solution is to manually go into your Bluetooth menu and disconnect whenever you're done using it. Other than those small challenges, the speaker portion of the Logi Dock is incredible. Now let's talk about the microphone. And to begin that conversation, the first thing we have to do is lower our expectations. Here on YouTube, we've come to expect some really high quality audio, and in the use cases where the Logi Dock is common, that's simply not the case. This thing will be common on Zoom calls, Teams chats, one-on-one check-ins, and Slack huddles, all of which historically have pretty terrible audio. The key on those corporate calls is being able to hear someone and being able to understand them. Anything beyond that is gravy. If you want to sound like a broadcaster, then by all means, bust out the boom arm and the high-quality microphone, like the Fifine boom arm and the Tank 3 mic that I reviewed on the channel, both linked down below. With that, you'll sound way better. But this product is all about ease and simplicity. So now let's hear it. The Logi Dock sounds like any other corporate speakerphone. It picks up your voice well, but it sounds empty and hollow. I've been in a lot of different conference spaces with a lot of different AV equipment, and outside of some really complex setups you'll find in sophisticated boardroom settings, they kind of all suck. So unfortunately, in my experience at least, This is about as good as it gets, especially when you consider the all-in-one nature and the current price point for this device. Where the microphone excels is in distance and noise cancellation. It does this by utilizing a 6-microphone array across the top, and the result is a solid pickup from just about any angle, including longer distances. So if I get up and walk across the room, you should still be able to hear me even as I get further away. And what this means is that if you're someone who likes to pace back and forth while you're on your phone calls, real talk, you should probably just get some headphones. But if you wanted to use a speakerphone like this, you could. And in my testing, the only thing that I've really run into is a little bit of warping and some unnatural sounds when doing this, but I haven't ever heard those reported back to me when I've been on calls, so in actual use, they might not be as bad. The Logi Dock also does a solid job with background noise. So in an extreme case, I live in a community where we've got an HOA that takes care of the lawn. So if we did an example of that, and I turn on some noise of a lawnmower in the background from a speaker off to my right, you can probably hear it through this microphone. But now let's see what it sounds like coming through the Logi Dock. Now, it was always the exact moment I was on a call that they'd come directly up to the windows of my office, and despite it being nearly impossible for me to hear what my coworkers were saying, they always told me that they couldn't hear the mower at all. Now, as a caveat to that story, I also would call out that since the dock will most commonly be paired with a service such as Zoom or Teams, these platforms all have their own audio enhancements and background noise suppression. So if it didn't sound too great with my demo here, that's probably why. Either way, though, the end result is that in 2 years of use in the corporate world, I can't remember a single time where someone struggled to hear me or commented on audio issues, which is very impressive. The last big topic to discuss is video. Since this is a USB hub with the ability to display out to 2 monitors, we need to discuss the nuances here as well. Beginning with connectivity, the dock works great with Mac or Windows as long as your device has a capable USB-C port with DisplayPort alt mode. From my own experience, this is very common on laptops today. All of my work laptops that were just given to me by companies, as well as my personal MacBooks, have been totally capable. I also believe that it would work with a desktop computer as long as you have a graphics card that includes a USB-C port with DisplayPort alt mode, which is much less common. I don't have a graphics card with this built in, so I haven't tested it myself, but I think it should work in theory. Based on comments from the original post, I also want to specifically call out that this can only connect to a single device at a time. Though it can output to 2 displays, it cannot accommodate multiple computers at the same time in the way that a KVM could. Now for the complexity surrounding displays. I will try my best to summarize, but if you want to be sure before buying, I do recommend using Logitech's support pages or reaching out to them directly. The first thing to address is actually that Logitech's materials are not that great. Across the marketing for Logi Dock, it clearly advertises 4K 60 Hz. However, if you go to the support details, you'll find this chart, which shows that you can have either 4K or 60 Hz, but not both at the same time. In reality, it shows a maximum of 4K 30 Hz or 1440p at 60 Hz. Personally, this feels like deceptive marketing to me. In Logitech's defense, they may have been quoting the maximum capacity of HDMI 2.0 and DisplayPort 1.4, both of which can handle 4K 60. However, once again, we have issues in that there is conflicting information within their support pages. In multiple places, the HDMI spec is quoted as HDMI 2.0. In multiple other locations, it's specified as HDMI 1.4b, a spec which can only get to 4K 30 Hz. So let's get to what all this has meant for my use. And to begin, I'll once again ground us with the fact that I expect most people shopping for this device won't care too much about 4K 60 Hz specifically, though they may be annoyed by any perceived false advertising. In reality, 4K 30, 1440p, or even 1080p in many instances is more than enough for your basic spreadsheets, PowerPoints, emails, and Zoom calls. When testing with a Windows machine, I was able to successfully get 2 displays at 4K 30 Hz. But as soon as I switched one of them to 4K 60 Hz, the other display would automatically be limited to 1440p. Macs, on the other hand, face their biggest limitation with their outputs from the USB-C ports. Since the introduction of Apple Silicon a few years ago, many MacBooks have been limited to a single display output from a USB-C port. My M1 MacBook Air, for example, and my M2 MacBook Pro both have this limitation. If you want to use this with a Mac, be sure to check on your specific model specifications first. In my daily use today with an M2 MacBook Pro, I only send one display through the Logi Dock, and I have a second connected directly to the included HDMI port. This works to get me dual displays, and is only slightly more annoying than when I previously used dual displays with a single cable on my corporate-issued Windows machines. Video capabilities are complicated, and there are limitations for throughput, which you will butt up against if you try to use high-powered monitors with maxed-out settings. But luckily, I find that the capabilities are sufficient for the primary use cases for which this thing was designed. The way I see it, this product has two main audiences. First, there is the work-from-home corporate worker who has a dedicated office space where they'll take calls. Second, Logitech is clearly pushing this product for use in office call room settings. So if you're a corporate buyer responsible for outfitting individual offices or call rooms, and you plan to order hundreds of these, make sure you use my affiliate link down below. But in all seriousness, I think that the ideal candidate looks something like this. You work in a corporate world, either fully remote or in a hybrid environment. You have some sort of a dedicated office, or at least a desk where you regularly take phone calls from. You've got one or two monitors, but you work in Microsoft Office or Google Docs, so you don't care much about frame rates or 4K. Heck, maybe your employer provided your monitors during a pandemic-era subsidy, and you don't even know what they really are. If this sounds like you are perfect for this product because you're basically what I was for many years and what I was doing when I bought this as a primarily remote worker 2 years ago. Now this brings me to my wish list for a potential version 2. First thing high up on that list is an Ethernet port to provide full wire internet connections rather than having to rely on Wi-Fi. A smaller power brick would be great, but may not really be feasible given the amount of power that this requires. More USB ports would be better, especially if some of them could be front-facing to give better accessibility. Improved display capabilities for higher frame rates or a third monitor would expand the use cases that this could accommodate, though, as I said, that's probably not the biggest priority for most members of the key audience that this thing is targeted at. Adding an SD card reader could be nice for creative types like myself. And finally, a headphone microphone combo jack would help simplify audio in the moments when you cannot use the integrated speaker, for example, if you need to be quiet during a call because a significant other is also on a call. The retail price for the Logi Dock is $400. However, on most days today, you can find one for under $200, and the lowest I saw at one point was a crazy $110 on Prime Day. Now, if you take this thing simply as the sum of its parts, you can absolutely find a more capable USB hub with better display options. You can get speakers on your desk that have higher sound quality, and you can get plenty of microphones with better audio. What's really tough to find, though, is something that can do all of this while being simple to use, small on your desk, and beautiful to look at. I personally love this product, and while it is not perfect, I can't imagine my desk without it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy detailed reviews like this, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one.